part of me that I try not to pay attention to, but it nags at me like a toddler wanting a pack of fruit snacks. I felt like a phony, a lie. I had arrived, except it wasn't really me. It was a version of me that I had spent my entire adult life creating. And that version had made it. But the real person I was, the real Chris Brown, that person, if you knew him, you would never have him sitting in this boardroom. He never would have turned your head. He wouldn't be here because he wouldn't have made it. My boss's boss saw an all-American boy, and I see a boy more familiar with the homeless shelters across our country than the arenas. He saw good looks. I see forgotten. He saw a silver spoon. I see poverty. He saw opportunity. I see survival. While I sat there and listened to him, I couldn't help but wonder if I had finally made it, or if I had just committed the worst possible crime against myself. I was too embarrassed to admit who I was and where I was from, that I had created a version of myself for the world to see, and now my boss was telling me he wanted to see the real me. This would be the most courageous work in my life to date. I reluctantly opened up and began to tell him and the rest of the people in the room my story, my real story. My story isn't pretty, but I deeply care for most of those who played a part in it. As with any story, there are good parts and bad parts, sometimes even played by the same person. And it's this contradiction of being both provider and abuser, or caretaker and addict, that makes it so hard for me to know where my own emotions lie when it comes to parts of my story. So, because I was confused internally and did not want to dishonor the people who I believe were doing the best they knew how, I rarely shared my story, and I've never put pen to paper. But in the last decade, those key players who left me conflicted all passed away. And through the hard work of grieving their loss and healing from wounds we endured together, I began to understand the roles they played, God's redemption of it all, and the restoration that can be found in the sting of our deepest pain. As I sat in that boardroom telling chapter after chapter of my story, I kept thinking, while I was surviving my childhood, God was building something in me so that I could do much more on this earth than just survive. I'm not alone in this. In the Old Testament of the Bible, while Moses was escaping the consequences of murdering someone, God was simultaneously making a leader. While Jonah was running away in fear, God was making him into a prophet. In the New Testament, while Peter was hanging his head in shame over his disloyalty, at the same time, Jesus was appointing him a leader of his church. God just does that. While we think we are merely surviving our pain, God is pioneering something new in us, something useful for this world, something beautiful. Sometimes the best thing we can do when going through pain is merely go through it and leave the rest with God. Going through pain is harder work than we think. It physically and emotionally exhausts us. It makes simple tasks like getting out of bed or taking a shower feel like a mountain to climb before our day even starts. And the tempting thing about pain is that we don't have to feel it if we don't want to. In today's world, we don't have to go through pain if we choose not to. We have so many options to numb ourselves and skirt around it. We can take the sleeping pills, drink the drink, scroll the screen, or drown ourselves in activity. We don't have to feel pain if we choose not to. I understand that many of you may not practice the same faith in Jesus that I do, and I respect that. But I believe that if you keep going with me, you will see that the message of this book will prove to be helpful and healing to you regardless of your faith. I think together we will find common ground in the trauma we have endured. We can celebrate the parts of us that we have been able to pick up and how we have moved on despite what we've been through. And I believe the parts of us that are still broken will find healing as we process our pain. I want to share with you something I learned from Jesus' life that I think is very important for us in the most painful moments.